The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the land of Uzi. Job sat on the porch of his sprawling estate, watching his servants tend to the flocks and fields. His life was a tapestry of blessings, wealth, health, and a family that filled his days with laughter. He was a man of integrity, known far and wide for his generosity and unwavering faith in God. But tonight, something lingered in the air, a whisper of unease, like the calm before a storm. Job's wife, Sarah, joined him, her brow furrowed. "You've been quiet today," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Is something troubling you?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I don't know. It's as if the world is holding its breath." Little did they know, far beyond the veil of the material world, a conversation was unfolding, one that would change everything. In the celestial realm, the sons of God gathered before the throne. Among them was Satan, the accuser, his presence like a shadow in the light. God's voice echoed, deep and resonant. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him, blameless, upright, a man who fears me and shuns evil." Satan stepped forward, a sly grin twisting his features. "Does Job fear God for nothing? You've blessed him with wealth and protection. But take it all away, and he will curse you to your face." God's gaze was steady, unyielding. "Very well. Everything he has is in your power, but do not lay a finger on him." The deal was struck. Back in Uzi, the storm broke. A messenger arrived, breathless and trembling. "Raiders attacked the oxen and donkeys," he gasped. "They killed the servants, and I alone escaped to tell you." Before Job could process the news, another servant rushed in. Fire fell from the sky, consuming the sheep and shepherds. Then another. The Chaldeans stole the camels and slaughtered the guards. Finally, the worst blow came. Your sons and daughters were feasting when a great wind struck the house. It collapsed, and they're all gone. Job fell to his knees, his heart shattered. He tore his robe and shaved his head, a sign of deep mourning. Yet through the tears he whispered, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised." In the shadows, Satan watched, his eyes gleaming with curiosity. "He still clings to his faith," he muttered. "But let's see how long that lasts." Little did Job know, this was only the beginning. Job's world had crumbled, but his faith remained, a flickering flame in the storm. Days turned into weeks, and the once vibrant man became a shadow of his former self. His skin, once healthy and radiant, now bore the marks of affliction. Painful sores covered his body, and he sat in the ashes, scraping his wounds with a piece of broken pottery. His wife, Sarah, watched him with a mixture of pity and frustration. "How long will you cling to your integrity?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Curse God and die." Job looked up, his eyes weary but resolute. "You speak as a foolish woman," he said gently. "Shall we accept good from God and not troubles?" Sarah turned away, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't understand his unwavering faith, not when their world had been reduced to ashes. Meanwhile, 3 of Job's closest friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, heard of his suffering. They traveled from their homes to comfort him, but when they saw him, they barely recognized the man they once knew. They wept aloud, tore their robes, and sprinkled dust on their heads in mourning. For 7 days and nights, they sat with him in silence, for they saw that his suffering was too great for words. On the 8th day, Job broke the silence. His voice was raw, filled with anguish. "Why did I not perish at birth? Why was I not hidden away in the ground? I have no peace, no rest, only torment." Eliphaz, the eldest, spoke first. "Job, think of it. Who, being innocent, has ever perished? Those who plow evil and sow trouble reap it. But if I were you, I would seek God and present my case to him." Job's eyes burned with frustration. What strength do I have, that I should still hope? My days are but a breath, and my life is but a shadow. I am a laughingstock to my friends, though I called on God, and he answered, a mere mortal, righteous and blameless. In the celestial realm, Satan observed the scene with a smirk. He still holds on, he said to the unseen forces around him. But let's see how deep his faith runs when his own mind turns against him. Back in Uzi, Job's friends continued to speak, each offering their own interpretation of his suffering. Bildad insisted that Job's children must have sinned to deserve such a fate. Zophar accused Job of hiding some secret wrongdoing. But Job refused to accept their explanations. I am innocent, he cried, yet God has wronged me. He has stripped me of my honor and crushed me with his hand. Why does he hide his face and consider me his enemy? The tension between Job and his friends grew, their words sharp and cutting. Yet beneath the surface, a deeper question loomed, one that neither Job nor his friends could answer. Why was this happening? As the sun set, casting long shadows over the ash-covered ground, Job sat alone, his mind racing. He had always believed in a just and loving God, but now, that belief was being tested in ways he never imagined. In the silence, a voice whispered, not from the heavens, but from within. What if the God you serve is not who you think he is? Job shuddered, pushing the thought away. But it lingered, like a seed planted in the soil of his soul, waiting to sprout. The days blurred together, each one heavier than the last. Job's friends had become his accusers, their words like daggers piercing his already broken spirit. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar took turns delivering long, impassioned speeches, each one a variation of the same theme. You must have sinned, Job. Repent, and God will restore you. But Job refused to accept their logic. How long will you torment me and crush me with your words? He cried, his voice trembling with frustration. If I have sinned, show me my offense. Why do you insist I am guilty without proof? Eliphaz leaned in, his tone patronizing. Job, consider this. Can a mortal be more righteous than God? Can a man be more pure than his Maker? God charges even his angels with error. How much more those who live in houses of clay, whose foundations are dust? Job clenched his fists, his patience wearing thin. I have heard many things like these. You are miserable comforters, all of you. If only I knew where to find God, I would state my case before him. I would fill my mouth with arguments and know what he would answer me. As the debate raged on, Job's mind began to wander. He thought back to the days of his prosperity, when his life was full and his faith unwavering. But now everything had changed. The God he once trusted seemed distant, even cruel. Why does God give light to the weary and life to the bitter in souls? Job mused aloud, his voice barely a whisper. For sighing has become my daily food, my groans pour out like water. What I feared has come upon me. What I dreaded has happened to me. I have no peace, no quietness, no rest, only turmoil. In the celestial realm, Satan watched with keen interest. He's beginning to question, he said, a sly smile spreading across his face. The cracks are forming. Soon, his faith will shatter. But God remains silent, his presence a mystery even to the heavenly hosts. Back in Uzi, Job's friends grew more insistent. Bildad raised his voice, his words sharp and accusing. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? Your children sinned against him, and he gave them over to their sin. But if you are pure and upright, he will surely restore you. Job's eyes blazed with anger. How long will you vex my soul and break me in pieces with words? Even if I were innocent, my mouth would condemn me. If I were blameless, it would pronounce me guilty. But I know my Redeemer lives, and in the end, he will stand upon the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. The words hung in the air, a declaration of faith amidst the chaos. But even as he spoke them, Job felt a pang of doubt. Who is this Redeemer? And will he truly come? As night fell, Job sat alone, his body aching and his mind racing. The voices of his friends echoed in his ears, but louder still was the voice within, the one that whispered questions he dared not ask aloud. What if God is not just? What if this suffering has no purpose? What if I am alone? Job buried his face in his hands, the weight of his thoughts unbearable. He had always believed in a God of order and justice, but now that belief was crumbling. And yet, deep within, a spark remained, a faint hope that somehow, somewhere, there was an answer. The arguments had exhausted Job. His friends, once silent in their grief, now filled the air with accusations and platitudes. Job's patience had worn thin, and his spirit was on the brink of breaking. But just as despair threatened to consume him, the sky darkened and the wind began to howl. A storm unlike any other descended upon Uzi. The air crackled with energy, and the ground trembled beneath their feet. Job and his friends looked up, their eyes wide with fear, as a whirlwind formed in the distance, swirling with power and purpose. From the heart of the storm, a voice boomed, deep, resonant, and utterly commanding. Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge? Job fell to his knees, his heart pounding. It was God. The voice continued, each word like a thunderclap. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me, if you understand, who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know, who stretched a measuring line across it. On what were its footings set, or who laid its cornerstone, while the morning stars sang together, and all the angels shouted for joy? Job's mind reeled. He had no answer. God's voice grew louder, more intense. Have you ever given orders to the morning, or shown the dawn its place? Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, or loosen the belt of Orion? Do you know the laws of the heavens? Can you set up God's dominion over the earth? Job trembled, his face pressed to the ground. I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. But God was not finished. Do you hunt the prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions? Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wander about for lack of food? Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Can you count the months they are pregnant? Do you know the time they give birth? Job's breath caught in his throat. The questions were relentless, each one revealing the vast gulf between his understanding and the infinite wisdom of God. Finally, God's tone shifted, softer but no less piercing. Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. Job's voice was barely a whisper. I am nothing. What can I say? I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. God's presence filled the air, overwhelming and undeniable. Listen, Job, and I will speak. I will question you, and you will answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's, and can your voice thunder like his? Adorn yourself with glory and splendor, and clothe yourself in honor and majesty. Then I myself will admit that your own right hand can save you. Job's heart shattered. He had questioned God, demanded answers, and now he stood face to face with the incomprehensible majesty of the Almighty. I know that you can do all things, Job said, his voice trembling. No purpose of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge? Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself, and repent in dust and ashes. The whirlwind subsided, and the air grew still. Job remained on the ground, his body shaking, his spirit humbled. He had sought answers, but what he found was something far greater, a glimpse of the infinite, a God beyond his understanding. But even in his humility, a question lingered, unspoken yet burning in his heart. Why? The storm had passed, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. Job sat in the ashes, his body weak, but his spirit strangely at peace. The encounter with God had left him humbled, yet something within him had shifted. The questions that once tormented him no longer burned with the same intensity. Instead, there was a quiet acceptance, a recognition that some mysteries were beyond his grasp. God's voice echoed once more, but this time it was softer, almost tender. "Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, listen to me. You have not spoken the truth about me, as my servant Job has. Now take 7 bulls and 7 rams. Go to my servant Job, and sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer." The 3 friends exchanged uneasy glances, but obeyed without question. They prepared the offering and stood before Job, their heads bowed in shame. Job, though still weak, rose to his feet. He placed his hands on their shoulders and prayed for them. In that moment, the tension between them dissolved, replaced by a fragile but genuine reconciliation. As the smoke from the offering rose into the sky, a sense of renewal filled the air. God's presence lingered, not as a whirlwind, but as a quiet assurance. "Job," God's voice whispered, "you have endured much, and your faith has not wavered. Now, I will restore what you have lost." Over the following months, Job's life began to transform. His health returned, stronger than before. His flocks multiplied, and his fields yielded abundant harvests. Friends and neighbors who had once avoided him now came to offer their support, drawn by the quiet strength that radiated from him. One evening, as Job sat outside his newly rebuilt home, Sarah joined him. She placed a hand on his arm, her eyes filled with a mixture of joy and sorrow. "We've been given so much," she said softly, "but I still miss them, our children." Job nodded, his heart aching with the memory. "They are with us, in a way," he replied. "Their lives were a gift, and their absence is a wound that will never fully heal. But we carry them with us, in here." He placed a hand over his heart. In time, Job and Sarah were blessed with more children, 3 daughters and 7 sons. Their home was once again filled with laughter and love. But Job was not the same man he had been before. The trials had stripped him of his illusions, leaving behind a deeper, more profound faith. One night, as he gazed at the stars, Job felt a presence beside him. It was not God's voice, but a quiet knowing, a gnosis that transcended words. He realized that the suffering he had endured was not a punishment or a test, but a journey that had led him to a truth he could not have found any other way. The God he had questioned was not the distant, capricious deity he had feared, but something far greater, a force of love and creation that encompassed both light and shadow. And in that understanding, Job found peace. Years later, as an old man, Job sat with his grandchildren gathered around him. They listened intently as he shared the story of his life, the blessings, the losses, and the whirlwind that had changed everything. "Remember this," he said, his voice steady and warm. "Suffering is not the end of the story. It is a path, though a difficult one, that can lead us to a deeper truth. Hold on to your faith, even when it feels like the world is against you. For in the end, there is light." As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the land of Uzi, Job closed his eyes and smiled. He had found his answer, not in the why, but in the who, and that was enough.